Thank you for joining me on my learning journey. Today I'm going to be sharing my learnings on how to get creative writing ideas. And sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Sometimes when you're doing a creative writing piece, getting started can be the hardest part because there are just so many different options and you don't know where to start. And sometimes after you get that initial idea, things go really smoothly. So I'm going to be helping you kind of get over that little obstacle of how do I find an idea. So my first tip here is to get inspiration from real life. And so you may be thinking, oh, how do I do this? I'm not doing realistic fiction. I'm doing historical fiction or fantasy or science fiction. How do I get inspiration from my real life? And the thing with that is getting inspiration from your real life doesn't mean just writing an autobiography and changing all the names and the setting. Sometimes it can be like, do you have a person in your life who has a characteristic that you really admire? Maybe your character, one of your characters can have a role model with a similar trait. So things like that. Another one is to try writing an extra chapter to a favorite book as a warm-up. And so this is essentially writing a fan fiction piece. And, sometimes, have you ever read a book and then thought, oh, this is a great story, great characters, I really enjoyed it, but I think that the plot would have also been good if they had done this instead. Or if this event had happened in the story in place of this one. And that's what I'm talking about. Instead of just saying it, write it. Write a chapter describing that scene. And sometimes that can be a great warm-up for your storytelling skills. And it can really get you into storytelling mode, which can help you improve your writing and get more ideas. Something that kind of goes with that is writing fractured fairy tales. Fractured fairy tales, and these are so fun. Fractured fairy tales are, at least for me, they are a joy to write as much as they are to read. Just because you get to be so creative with it. And it feels like it's so creative and it's also still based on a different story. And a lot of times they'll end up being, I don't know, I just realized that a lot of fractured fairy tales are like comedy stories. Anyway, so with both of these, of course, you don't want to plagiarize or paraphrase. You want to come up with your own story idea. But that's why I say use these as a warm-up to warm up your storytelling skills. Or if you're doing a fractured fairy tale, you want to take something really, something really small from it and launch off from there. You don't want to take their entire plot and just change it up, because that's not making your own story. Another idea is to use a prompt or a hook. And of course, this is if you're not already given a hook. There are plenty of prompts and hooks in things like English workbooks, textbooks, online. There are plenty of prompts out there. And the great thing about them is a lot of times it'll be a really generic prompt, but you'll see it in a different way and it'll really resonate with you and results in a good idea. And again, if you are not if you are not doing this for a school project, or a school project or any other kind of assignment, if you're not doing it like that, if there are no guidelines, you're just writing it on your own, if there are no other guidelines for what genre to do and things like that, try switching to science fiction or fantasy as a break. And I'm not saying give up your historical fiction, realistic fiction, and things like that. I'm saying take a break, write a fantasy story, and come back. And that's because of this. A lot of times when you're writing historical fiction or realistic fiction, you'll feel kind of limited to being realistic. And that's not the case with science fiction or fantasy. And that kind of, leads me into the next one, which is sometimes an unfiltered, if I could spell right, then that would help. Okay, unfiltered brainstorm or a brain dump. And that kind of goes with, switching genres to stop yourself from constantly limiting your ideas is, just sometimes it's best to just start with an unfiltered brainstorm and not really worry too much about, are people going to like this enough? Is it going to, not end up the way I want it to? Is it going to end up being too short? Don't worry too much about those things to begin with. That's one strategy for it. And of course, there are times when you need to have that structure, that plan. Okay, this is what's going to happen, and it should be exactly this length, and the plot should work like this. Sometimes that's better, right? And sometimes that's required, of course. If you're writing a piece that has certain guidelines you have to meet. But other times when you're trying to just completely be creative, having your brainstorming be a little unfiltered can help. And sometimes that'll result in the best ideas. And so I want to end this video with a discussion question. So it's just, what are some ways that you overcome writer's block? Maybe at the beginning of a story when you're trying to get started, like I mentioned in this video, or in the middle of a story when you're in the middle of writing a story and you get to a spot where you're kind of stuck and you don't know where to go next. What are some ways that you overcome that? Let me know down in the comments below. I would also really appreciate it if you leave your comments, feedback, and further suggestions for additional learnings below. I'll see you in the next video.